joining from. Thank you very much for joining us for this Arum Approved Systems series webinar with Telrock Systems. A quick bit of housekeeping from me. So over on the right hand side of the screen, you should see the Q&A and the chat icons. Please do feel free to drop any questions in there and we will come to those at the end. And we're also going to run a couple of polls. So you can see the speech bubble with the 3 vertical lines on it. Please do head over there to answer the polls when we put them up. We're joined today by Dale Williams, CEO of Telrock Systems. So before I pass over to Dale to introduce himself, a quick intro from me and a summary of the Arum Approved program. So I'm Steve Coppard. I've worked in debt resolution for nearly 23 years. Done everything from operations to analytics, project and program management, commercial oversight, and then onto the Cabinet Office where I was responsible for prompting policy and strategy improvements for the entirety of debt owed to central government by businesses and individuals. About 18 months ago, I joined Arum and its sister company just as the Group Director of Debt Policy and Strategy. So if we could pop along to the next slide, please. So look, Arum is a professional services and advisory firm, but deep expertise in all areas of collections and recoveries. We're currently celebrating our 25th year and we operate in more than 20 territories across the globe. Our clients include central and local government, the debt advice sector, utilities, broad range of firms across the private sector, including technology vendors, high street banks, car financing, and so on. We provide a blend of practitioner-led consulting and end-to-end change and program delivery services. And the Arum Approved System program assesses your system against more than 20 core capabilities, from which we then deliver a detailed report, including scores, recommendations for improvement and future growth. If your system meets the criteria, then the Arum Approved certificate and logo allow you to demonstrate your system's capability in the competitive marketplace, benchmarking yourself against your peers, which in turn can help with increased sales conversions. And of course, you gain exposure to Arum's marketing collateral, including the opportunity to co-host webinars such as this one. So talking of co-hosting, I better shut up there and pass over to Dale to introduce himself and Telrock Systems. Dale, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So I'm Dale. I'm CEO of Telrock and also its parent company called CIT Systems, which for those of you wondering is collections in the cloud. In collections one way or the other for about 40 years. Started out on the practitioner side, working for HSBC in the UK, collecting off paper ledger cards back in the day. And then progressively as part of Lloyds TSB, where I ran centralised debt recovery for TSB in Brighton for a number of years. I then switched horses and decided to join the vendor side. So I joined London Bridge Software in 1997. I had been, at that point in time, London Bridge's very first debt manager client when I was at the bank. I was client for debt manager version 1.0 back in November 1990, of all things. Moved to the USA in 1999, been vendor side since that point in time, joining Telrock into late 2014, having worked at London Bridge in the USA, FICO, who acquired London Bridge at the time, so a Fortune 500 company called First American. I spend my time between the US and the UK. I happen to be in London today, heading back to Atlanta, Georgia on Friday. That's me. Little bit about Telrock. We have essentially 2 solutions we bring to the marketplace. Optimus, which is our end-to-end integrated collection recovery platform, cloud native, built from the ground up, covering the entire life cycle from early out all the way through to post-charge off, being a system of record, managing agency placement, debt sale, and various other discrete processes. And we also have Smart Connect, which is a subset actually of Optimus, which is a rules engine, system integration component, and digital messaging, which we market to organizations that are looking for just that subset of solutions. Our leadership in total is made up of a number of London Bridge software alumni, FICO alumni, some of whom I can see on the vendor side on this call today. So hello, Chris Hopkins, if you're there. But also people from what was First Data, Equifax, and also CGI. A gentleman by the name of Steve Crowell, who was with CGI for 30 years, is part of our management team now. So a broad background, if you will, in collection software over sort of 30 plus years. Moving to the agenda then, I think one of our friends at Arum are going to initiate an audience poll initially. But just to talk you through the agenda, I'm going to do a quick poll, and then Steve and I are going to sort of talk through the basic tenets of consumer protection. We have folks on this call from the UK that are subject to UK regulation by the FCA, and also client organizations from the US that are subject to regulation under the FDCPA and regulated by the CFPB. So we've kept the themes generic, and hopefully they'll be useful to participants from both countries. And then we're going to look at how modern software platforms, and I make the distinction there, anything sort of designed and developed within the last sort of 5 to 7 years, may help clients meet their regulatory burden, as opposed to some of the older, more legacy platforms that might be restricted in their capacity there. Then we're going to do another audience poll, a Q&A session, and a wrap-up. So with that said, I think you're going to launch a first poll question, Esther or Hannah?
Yeah, we've got that up now.
This is essentially the question. So really what we're looking to see is, for those of you that are client side, to what extent do you think that your current collection software platform supports your regulatory obligations? Is it a really, really good job? Maybe so, or not really. So Hannah or Esther, if you can let me know when the responses populate, and we'll move on. You see some come through, Steve?
There's one just popped in as a not really. So if everyone else is on, if you just want to pop over to that poll, it's on the right-hand side. Should have the little speech bubble with the 3 lines on it. It should be a blue dot on it now. That's it. We're just getting a couple more coming through now, Dale. Okay. As they're coming through, I'll move on to the next part on the agenda then. So like I said, we're just going to cover 4 key themes, if you will, of regulations that, I sit both sides of the fence. I deal with client organizations both in the UK and the US. So these are somewhat thematic and apply to all. So the first one up really is, if you're going to sort of keep yourself on the straight and narrow with your regulator as it comes to compliance of, business practice in the collections arena, these things here are really some core themes. So, you've got to make justifiable and ethical decisions. Understands to reason, right? But to do that, you really need to have information and data available to your collection system, your agents, your collection system's workflow and rules engine in order to make, justifiable and ethical decisions, right? So as a first clue as to where I might be going on, software can support you. You've got to treat those customers fairly and equitably. Specifically in the UK, there is some regulations around treating customers fairly. Likewise, there's broader regulations in the US as well, where you've got to demonstrate that you've got to treat cohorts of customers equitably. You can't discriminate. A very obvious example is you have to make sure that any promise plans or payment plans that you enter into can actually be supported by disposable income. And it's no good talking to a customer that can only afford $30 or £30 a month and forcing them to try and take a payment plan for $100 a month. That's hardly going to sit very well with the regulator.
And then the last bullet on this particular section, you've got to make consistent decisions across all channels. So if you're allowing a customer to self-serve, for example, via SMS or via a self-serve portal, they've got to be offered the same choices as if they were talking to a live agent. And that has a significant bearing on the underlying collections technology. So I'll stop on that first set of bullets and see if there's something that Steve wanted to add.
Yeah, I think as well, Dale, you talk about the promise payment plans being supported by disposable income. It also makes good commercial sense. It results in far fewer breakages, and you get that stick rate. It's more or less a once and done transaction with the customer, and you get to focus on the rest of the core business rather than having to go back and try and rehabilitate people. So it's just good sense all round.
So the next set, again, these apply equally across the US and the UK. Essentially, the concept of do no harm, right? You have to be seen to be acting in good faith and avoiding foreseeable harm. So, for, again, that sort of promise or payment amount example applies there too. If you insist on the customer paying more than they can reasonably afford, the chances are something else is going to happen to them which may cause them harm. So again, to the extent that you are seen to be acting in good faith, seen to be avoiding foreseeable harm and being able to demonstrate that in your collection activities, that's more likely to steer you clear of issues with your regulator. Obviously, do not threaten or harass. There's legislation around that both sides of the Atlantic as well. That can fall into the realms of excessive contact with a customer, calling the customer too many times in a given period, sending too much correspondence in a given period, and so on. And obviously, automation of process can help you avoid those kind of pitfalls. Any folks on from the US will understand the expression contact cadence, or hopefully will. So under Reg F, under FDCPA in the US, you are only permitted to either contact or make attempted contact a certain number of times in a given period. Now, obviously, rules can help you there to make sure that you don't, queue an account to a dialer every 30 minutes, right? Or send 15 SMS in a day, each of which will get you into a lot of trouble. But equally, having that contact cadence data available to the collector is a powerful tool as well, and we'll talk a bit about that. And then also, do not contact via prohibited channels. In the US, there's TCPA regulations that will prohibit you from contacting a consumer via a dialer call or an SMS. That consumer has not given you express consent to contact them. Likewise, in other jurisdictions, if the customer says, do not contact me by SMS, do not contact me by phone, you need to be able to comply with that as well. So anything else to add to that, Steve?
I think just very briefly, one of the things that we expect the regulator to look very dimly on is where we're not using data to identify foreseeable harm. And that's especially going to be true, Dale, of the data that organisations already hold. They need to be leveraging that.
Yeah. And as you probably guessed, these are all primers for what we're going to talk about as to how the technology can help. But just wanted to bring alive a bit what the regulatory landscape looks like. So very definitely under consumer duty in the UK, you have to maintain a framework of evidence. And I would suggest that applies equally under FDCPA and other regs in the US as well, where you can demonstrate that you have defined accountability, that you have trained your employees and or given them guidance or scripting, something to assist, making sure the products and services are fit for purpose. Now, that may well be the original loan or credit card or service, but equally anything that you offer as a collections resolution needs to be fit for purpose as well. A long drawn out 120-month repayment plan at $5 a month is probably not in the customer's best interest if they can afford a lot more. It may be good for you in terms of interest accrual, but not good for the. And you've got to demonstrate that you have been monitoring the outcomes of your collection treatment strategies and periodically reviewing them. And again, software can support that. Anything else to add to that one, Steve?
Again, just, we're seeing the regulator in the UK now looking on products and services, especially, Dale, where they used to look for aggregate product level data to see what the outcomes were. They're now looking at almost agreement level data. So there's much more of a deep dive into the data that the regulator is asking for to ensure that firms are actually meeting their obligations.
And then last but not least, there's the subject of data privacy and security of that data. Now, we, along with a number of others in the industry, deliver collection solutions as SaaS. So we're processors. We have responsibilities to make sure that data is secure. So you as a client or us as a provider, you as a client need to satisfy yourself that we meet the applicable regulations to safeguard and keep that data secure. So, for us, we're regulated under DPA, GDPR, and GLBA in the States. We provide attestation. We're a PCI level 1 certified organization. We're also subject to a SOC 2 audit. Other organizations will follow the ISO framework, but it is very important, obviously, that sensitive data, particularly that is non-public, names, addresses, emails, so on, balances, arrears, amounts, are kept secure. And heaven help us, either you, the client, or us, the vendor, if we don't maintain those standards. So, if there's anything to add on that, Steve?
No, look, I think that's a really neat summary of a fairly complex topic, Dale. When we look, the FCA in the UK has said that consumer duty will become the lens through which it would assess its rules. We're already seeing evidence of that. So, for example, fair value assessments on savings interest rates not being passed on quickly enough. And I think where previously there was some criticism that the consumer duty was too vague and not prescriptive enough, the FCA then issued a 14-point plan on interest rates after reviewing those fair value assessments. So what we've got is a set of principles viewed through that lens of consumer duty. So whenever it's pointed at a particular problem, it crystallizes those principles into a set of specific rules. So we need to be flexible and agile in our ability to respond to those rules as they're created.
Right, so the purpose of this slide really was just to give you some examples of some of the regulatory challenges and the areas that are facing collection organizations as a primer to then moving on and say, okay, so how can modern software help in this arena? So with that said, I'm going to break this up into segments which hopefully are logical. So first off, information is key, right? The ability to get information into the collection system or available through other means to the rules engine, the workflow engine, and importantly, collection agents is paramount here. And there's really three types of approaches. APIs. So I imagine any modern vendor out there today has a suite of out-of-the-box APIs that allow for the real-time transfer and update of data. We've got about 200 plus out-of-the-box APIs we publish for the usual things like customer data, account data, demographic data, balances, and so on, for new account load and updates and sending data back to hosts and third-party systems. This next option we think is kind of unique. Over and above having an extensive suite of out-of-the-box APIs, we also deliver a tool which is essentially a no-code API configuration layer, which we call Smart Connect, which enables a client business analyst to orchestrate and create new APIs without being a software developer. So any other access to any other data or feeding any other data out of our collection system can be created via APIs using what it is, for all intents and purposes, a drag and drop integration builder that removes the complexity of real-time system integration, puts it in the realms of a business analyst as opposed to a programmer. So you can orchestrate, your SOAP or REST API integration to third-party systems. And then I imagine other vendors in the space, just like us, come against clients that still have some degree of file-based transfer. We have a no-code component for that makes the integration with files very simple to create, test, and to put into production. It needs no development resource. The first thing is that modern platforms make it easier to get the data in, be it via API, via file transfer, into the collection system than perhaps it was 10 years ago. Anything to add to that, Steve? You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, one of the really important bits for me here is the ability to integrate with legacy systems. I think the coming from a government background where there was still quite a lot of green on black systems out there, we see in many of the older platforms, that weren't built with modern regulation in mind, or the functionality to be easily updated to reflect changes in regulation, that ability to extract data and manipulate it either for management information purposes or other reasons on a modern platform to satisfy the regulation is going to be core to achieving compliance. And I think if you can overlay a new platform in the first instance and directly port that data across from the existing system, that takes away a lot of the pain and can get you up and running relatively quickly.
Okay, so with all of that said, great, you can get the data in. You've now got to present it in a format that can be easily consumed by, in this instance, the agent, the examples I'm showing. So you've got to be able to organize that information in relevant ways, role-based. So for an early stage collector might have a different view of the UI than somebody who's involved in, for example, late stage or bankruptcy handling and the like. We, throughout in our platform, we deliver a substantial suite of configurable panels, information about the customer, information about the accounts. We also have these things called key summary data, which is things you can see across the top there, all configurable by the client to be able to present key data to the collector right in their face so they can see things. So in this particular example, this UI is configured to show that this consumer is vulnerable and the reason for the vulnerability. We also, through rules, are able to prescribe the next best action on the account. Why is the account here? Who's the collector? What type of product is it? Where is it in the collection strategy and so on? Scripting is something that we provide. We have integral scripting, and that can be either training scripting or compliance scripting. So in this instance, for example, if you have to quote that you're recording the call for training or compliance purposes, or you have to cite a mini Miranda, and some of those vary state by state in the US, what you have to say to the customer. All of that can be automated through scripting that is user, account, and customer context sensitive to provide a script for your collector to say to the consumer. And they acknowledge that script in that button there, And that writes away to the audit trail that, yes, Steve Coppard on the 14th of November did read the mini Miranda to this particular customer and acknowledged it. And in doing so, that then freed him up to take the action on the account. And then for US clients that want it, but also for UK clients, we have a contact cadence panel that shows by the channel the actual contact or attempted contact that has been made with that consumer within the last 7, 14, 21, 35 days and so on, so that they can actually see whether or not an action they might take manually could cause them to be in non-compliance. That's scripting engine, entirely integral to the solution, can guide the conversation, help you make sure that your agents say the right thing, do the right things, provide them with key summary data about the account, and in this particular example, this consumer is vulnerable, and also prescribe a next best action. So these are ways in which you can take all of that data that you've managed to get into the collection system and present them in an optimal fashion to the agent. Anything you want to add to that from a compliance perspective, Steve?
Yes, I guess what jumps out at me there is, the requirement for evidence under the consumer duty here in the UK to actually show the FCA what you've done rather than just tell it what you've done is key. And I think the thing that jumps out at me here is configurability. So while we don't yet know the granularity of data that the FCA will be looking for, as I mentioned just now, it's certainly going a lot deeper than previously. And as such, I think it's fair to assume that the more data, the more evidence that you have access to around what you did on each individual case and when, the more likely you are to be able to satisfy the regulator when it does direct its lens at our part of the industry.
So the next area I wanted to touch on is omni-channel. So yes, availability of the data is key, but you also have customers that aren't going to talk to you out during call center hours. And you have other channels, particularly the younger population these days have a preference to deal with you through other channels such as two-way SMS, email, and self-serve portals. So delivering interaction with your customers via omni-channel approaches can help you in your compliance as well. So, for example, we provide a fully native consumer self-serve portal. It's not a bolt-on, it's not from another vendor, it's our own technology. It allows the consumer to authenticate themselves. Obviously, that's important. It's the right consumer, right? They can set up a payment wallet, make a payment. They can complete a SFS compliant I&E form partially. They can stop. They can go back to it to a saved version. All of which helps obviously collect information, which will help you make better collection decisions. And on our portal, they can also upload and download documents. So, for example, if you want to see a pay stub to help you make a decision on a payment plan, they can upload that. Or you can provide them documents or forms to fill, which they can download and then upload. The important thing really is that with native digital channels, that's part and parcel of the collection system, those channels are subject to the same rule sets as the workflow and rules engine that drives automated strategies and also presents, for example, in the case of a payment plan, to the collector, the same options. So they're going to get the same, okay, based on rules, we want you to pay 36 installments of $55 a month starting on date X. They'll get the same recommended resolution whether they come through the portal or whether they're talking to an agent. And that's obviously important from a regulatory standpoint that there is consistency there. Anything to add on that, Steve?
Yeah, look, you have to go where customers are, and we know that omni-channel is a solid way of driving out sludge and friction from the customer journey. So, for example, a customer's work may not make it easy for them to make phone calls, but they may be able to engage more easily via messaging. So if we want to encourage that contact, we have to do it in a way that's convenient for the customer. And look, bottom line, it makes sense to automate journeys where possible, but also make it easy for customers to get support from an agent when they need it, be that via web chat, dedicated messaging app, or portal. But it doesn't make sense, I think, in today's modern world, to have an agent take somebody through the entirety of the process, and unless it's an extreme case.
It's remiss of me, just to toot our horn about our software. We maintain contact preferences and contact permissions. The rules engine interrogates those, so it won't send an SMS to a consumer where there's no consent. It won't send an email or an SMS to a consumer where there's not a good email or mobile phone number. And likewise, it won't queue a call to the dialer either if there's not an acknowledged good phone number. So automation can help a lot around the sequencing of contact events based on channel. And then just a collective of other aspects of modern solutions, excuse me, that lend themselves to improving your compliance posture. So it makes sense then that information needs to be current, so real-time integration is important. It needs to be easy to understand by the agent, so the ability to create role-based views of the data based on the type of action being taken, the type of collector, is it early stage, late stage, specialist in a field of bankruptcy or foreclosure or what have you, and obviously security. So, first out of the gate, currency of data is all a product of real-time processing, right? The ability to ingest new information real-time into the collection system. Our platform's not batch. Anything new come in updates real-time. The workflow and the rules update real-time. So the actions being taken are based on the most recently available data. We have a graphical workflow builder. So that product generates BPNN2 compliant Java code, and that can be annotated. And not only is that useful for audit purposes, to say to an audit, internal or external audit partner, here is a graphical true representation of the strategy that's been applied to this account, these cohorts of accounts, this particular strategy, but also it can be annotated with descriptions that make it easier to interpret. And the collection agent can actually see that workflow within the collector workbench and see where the account has come from and where it's going to. So it's a good visualization tool for the agent, but also any audit partner. Obviously, automation of process is desirable to the extent it's achievable, because you can implement your rules, policy, and therefore your regulatory policy within the rules engine and workflow engine. And obviously, being able to record every single action that's happened as an audit trail, but also as history for the collection agent to see what's happened before is very important. Compliance scripting I've touched on, audit history I've touched on, and then obviously having a vendor, if it's software as a service, that has the appropriate accreditation around privacy and information security is very important. So just to recap then, the extent to which the data is made available impacts on your ability to meet your regulatory burden. How current that information is, likewise, impacts and the ease of understanding that the collection platform provides for you, for your agents and for your rules engines, are all criteria that impact the extent to which you can comply with the regs. Optimizing and removing the complexities of integration is therefore key. In any organization, if you have to rely on programmers, you're probably waiting in line. So we and probably other vendors in the space try and remove that complexity of integration with a suite of out-of-the-box APIs. We go further by providing an integration tool that enables business analysts to create new integrations without technical support. Role-based UIs and views obviously facilitate the understanding of the data by the collection agent. And true omni-channel across the channels that you want to use, if it's supported by a single source of rules and workflow, is going to make sure that you present same options irrespective of the channel that the consumer chooses to engage in with you. And therefore, hopefully you all agree that the extent to which your provider can facilitate that integration, presentation of the data, the automation of rules so that you know your processes are compliant, and a feature-rich omni-channel experience goes some way to helping you compared to some of the more legacy platforms that may be out there. So with that said, Steve, can you just articulate what the audience poll results were for number one?
Yeah, absolutely. So our current collections platform does a good job of supporting our regulatory obligations. 40% said very true, 40% said somewhat true, and 20% said not really.
Okay, I guess we're really interested in the not reallys then. Well, thank you for that. That's useful information for us to take away for sure. And then we have a second question for you, which is, okay, we're kind of asking you the same question again, but now as you've gained, hopefully through what Steve and I have talked to you about, an understanding of the kind of things we're getting at, what might be available to you. Could we do more as a collection organization to support regulatory compliance if we had better tools, as exemplified by some of the things that I've talked about? So if you all could answer that question real quick, then we'll move into a quick Q&A.
Okay, and just a reminder, folks, you should have a blue dot over on the right-hand side with the speech bubble, the 3 lines on it. So if you could pop in there and just select one of those 3 answers, that'd be great. We do have some questions as well, Dale, which is good to see.
Okay, good. Got any percentages for us on the second poll, Steve?
No, I think everybody's got a little bit shy.
All right, we can live without that. Let's move on to the Q&A. You say we've got some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So first one here, Dale, is you mentioned contact cadence as a configurable UI panel. Can you talk more about this?
Yeah, sure. So those that are dialed in from the US, you'll have an appreciation of what's known as Reg F under the FDCPA, which is a whole new set of regulations that came into force back end of last year. But one of the consequences of that is this concept of contact cadence. And interestingly, it covers both attempted contacts, so I tried to call him, right, as well as actual contacts. Yeah, I got to speak to him. I got a right party contact. And the regulations prescribe that you cannot exceed a given number of combined contacts or attempted contacts in any given period. And that goes across all channels. So it talks to the importance of having visibility of all channel contacts in the same place, so that your rules engine can say, have I called, sent an SMS or an email, this customer? If so, count. And then in our case, one of the optional panels that we can display on the collector UI is a contact cadence panel that actually shows that data real time for the agent to see. So they can see, oh, this particular customer I'm talking to has had 2 SMS and 3 phone calls in the last 7 days, but no emails, for example. Yeah. So they need to be aware if for some reason they're in that account and it hasn't been presented to them automatically, i.e., for example, if the customer phones in, that they are incrementing the contact count. I can see that regulation coming down the path in the UK, candidly, something that will prescribe a maximum number of contacts or attempted contacts, with the aim of trying to prescribe what constitutes harassment and what doesn't. That's what contact cadence is. It's born of Reg F under the FDCPA in the US. Hopefully that answered the question for whoever asked it.
Great, thank you, Dale. So we had another one. How does compliance scripting work?
Okay, so I'm obviously talking about our solution here. There are solutions out there that have sort of bolt-on scripting capabilities. We designed it in from the get-go. So essentially, scripting is a configurable component of our solution. You can turn it on, turn it off. You can say for this type of user actioning this type of account within this strategy, present this script window and we saw a screenshot of our UI, and that populates with the words that the agent needs to say, or that you can simply say, remember to quote the mini Miranda for the state of Minnesota, right? Which those collectors probably know off by heart, but you can actually populate it automatically into a window that appears in the UI and have them acknowledge that they did it. So later on, when the auditor comes in and some consumer says, oh, you didn't, say that you were recording the call or that you were calling about a collection account. Yes, we did. Here's the audit trail. Here's the fact that this agent at this date, this time, said that and acknowledged it. So that's how scripting works. So it runs in parallel with the collector UI. It can be either a compliance script that requires them to say something and do something, or it can be just simply a training script for a new collector. Just ask them for the payment, something like that. But from a compliance scripting standpoint, it's in the wheelhouse of regulatory compliance as proof that you said what you were prescribed by law to say in that jurisdiction, and that the collector said it and acknowledged it. Hopefully
Great.
That answered that question.
Thanks, Dale. So we've got 2 more. So if we zip through those,
Okay.
and I will then give the results of the poll, and I think we're close to the end then. So the next question was, can you expand on what no-code API configuration layer is?
Yeah. Okay. So we think this is fairly unique, but essentially we have created a technology that through drag and drop enables a business analyst to orchestrate API conversations between our solution and any other third-party solution. So, be it REST or be it SOAP, it's a drag and drop graphical tool that removes all of the complexities, right, to orchestrate API integration. If you go to our website, which I'll put up now, and look for Smart Connect, you'll find a sales slick on there, and it has a visualization of what that drag and drop looks like. But basically, it's any other integration, real-time integration that you want that goes beyond our out-of-the-box pre-published APIs. You can orchestrate API integration, and we've removed the complexities of it.
Great, thanks, Dale. So the last one, I've actually got a bit of a wry smile on my face, because when I was in Cabinet Office, the Deputy Prime Minister of Greece asked me this very question. So the question is, does segmentation in collection strategy or any targeted treatment violate treating everyone equally?
Well, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. So it depends where you put your lens is the answer. So the way that we've always looked at it is that actually treating people according to their circumstances is how we treat everybody equally. That is the principles-based approach that we take, that everyone is treated according to their circumstances. That's the thing that's the same. So we don't have we'll treat you according to your circumstances because you're in a vulnerable situation, but actually these folks over here, they've got a bit of money, so we're just going to go and do what we want with them. No, everybody gets treated according to their circumstances, and then that principle becomes the thing that remains the same across your entire debt book. So I hope that answers that one. It satisfied the Deputy PM of Greece, but I hope it satisfies our
good enough for him or her, then great.
Excellent.
Well,
all right.
Well, if there's no further questions, hopefully you'll see some contact information there. So thank you everybody for joining us today, whichever side of the Atlantic you happen to be on. Hopefully you found that useful. I think we're going to mail a link to this presentation if folks would like it. Again, thanks very much for your time. Thanks on behalf of Telrock for sure. Over to you, Steve.
Yep. Okay, folks. All that's left for me to say is thank you to you, Dale, for investing the time to join us today, and thank you to everybody who's joined the webinar itself. Again, investing the time to listen to us. If you do have any follow-up questions, reach out to Telrock or Arum. We'll make sure that we get you a response. With that out of the way, thank you everyone, and that's a wrap.
Good day.